what I'm going to show you next is how do you quickly analyze what kind of personality type somebody is. Okay, so we know that there's 4 types, right? We know there's the dominant, the influencer, the steady relater, and the conscientious thinker. The question is, how do you figure out what they are without having them go out and take some kind of, assessment to figure it out? So we've come up with a way for you to ask a couple questions quickly, and this is based upon your first impression of them in the first couple minutes, and that's all you need to know to figure this out. Or if other people know them, if you ask these questions, you'll figure it out. So the first question is this: are they an extrovert or are they slightly reserved? If they're an extrovert, they fall into one of 2 categories. They're either a D for a dominant or they're an I for an influencer, because those 2 personality types are the extroverts of the 4. If they're slightly reserved, then you know they're either a steady relater or they're a conscientious thinker. Now, I'm emphasizing reserved versus introvert because I think of an introvert as somebody who's more of a wallflower and a lot more inward. You'll find the steady relators and the conscientious thinkers can very much be, they're very personable and very likable. They're just not quite outgoing like the I's are. But I don't really think of them as extroverts. I just think of them as slightly reserved, maybe a little more laid back. So that's the choice: extrovert or slightly reserved. If they're extrovert, now you got to ask yourself a question, and this is intentionally a forced word choice. You got to pick the best word. So here's the 2 word descriptions. Are they very direct or are they friendly? That's your choice. And if you say they're both, sorry, you got to pick the best word. Are they very direct or are they friendly? Which one fits the best? If they're direct, then they're a D. And if they're friendly, then they're an I. That's their primary. Okay? Now that's on the extrovert piece. Now let's drop down to the slightly reserved. Here's the forced word choice for those 2 types. If they fall into the slightly reserved category, then you've got to ask yourself, are they cooperative, or choose the word obliging, one of those 2 words, or are they analytical and detailed? So cooperative and obliging, or analytical and detailed. Those are your 2 choices. If they're cooperative and obliging, then you know they're a steady relater. If they're analytical and detailed, then you know they're a C. So conscientious thinker. So what did we just figure out? We just figured out within 87% probability, based upon the studies I've seen, we figured out with an 87% probability what type they are. Now that tells me a lot. It tells me how I need to approach them, what kind of information they're going to need to make a decision, what kind of people are going to need to be involved, how quickly they're going to move through the sales process, the kind of questions they're going to ask me, the kind of sales questioning techniques that I should use when dealing with them, and what's the best way to close them. Okay? So that tells me that information, and in the manual, I've got a lot of that stuff spelled out on how do you present to them, questions asked, how do you close, all that stuff is there. Now, one other thing I want to say before we move on to the next section, and that is people buy from people they like. We all know that. People buy from people who are like them. But here's some of the challenge. A D, like me, selling to another D isn't necessarily the best fit. So when you have a D salesperson selling to a D, an I, an S, or a C, it's not going to be equal every step along the way. An I selling to an I will be a really good fit, but part of the challenge is they're going to be so friendly that they may run out of time because they're having such a great time together they never get around talking to business. The D selling to a D will usually get down to business, get to the points, go through things, but if there's any headbutting going on, the D salesperson needs to back down a little bit, because you may win whatever that is you're headbutting, but you're going to lose the battle because they're going to go somewhere else. Okay, an S selling to an S. It's going to take a while, but they're going to relate really well. There's going to be a lot of trust, and it takes a while to get there. But once they're there, they will be lifelong friends that you can count on forever. And a C selling to a C, there's going to be lots of details going back and forth, and you'd see this in like technical sales. Lots of analytics, analytical stuff going on. Be prepared to go into more detail than you've ever had to go into before, but when they make decisions, they make really good, sound decisions. So just be aware that knowing your type and who you're interacting with is going to make a huge difference on everything that you do.